Tamils, curry, and 450 years of Europeans' colonial eras. In its 3,000-year history, curry and the Tamils have encountered foreigners, particularly Europeans, more than once. The pre-medieval period saw links with Romans and Greeks, which are well documented. We are going to explore the post-medieval European links, and these links led to colonial ideas, unlike the pre-medieval times with Romans who also had a massive empire across Europe and in Egypt. This was because Tamils were resourceful and militarily powerful too. However, when the Portuguese arrived in the late 15th century, they had superior tools such as cannons, gunpowder, and guns, giving them a competitive advantage as the Tamils were militarily weak. Initially, the Portuguese concentrated on consolidating the seas off Tamil areas, taking control of the Gulf of Mannar, where pearl fishing thrived. Pearls from this area were popular among royal families and the wealthy, with Cleopatra's Pearl being a notable example. By the time the Portuguese turned their attention to land areas, the more powerful Wijaya Empire had decided to push southward to consolidate in order to safeguard against the invading Mughal forces from the north. Rather than confronting the vastly superior army of that empire, the Portuguese made a deal with them to preserve exclusively the trading posts along the coast, mostly along the Curry Zone or Curry Mandalam, later dubbed Coromandel by the Dutch, before relocating to Goa and Ceylon, which were close by. Goa became the only Portuguese colony in the Indian subcontinent, and from this area, they gave present-day Bombay, Mumbai, as dowry to King Charles II of England, who married a Portuguese princess in the late 17th century. The South Indian subcontinent remained free from European rule until the British arrived and established their empire, legally founding the country, British India, in 1858. However, in Ceylon, the Portuguese maintained two separate colonies, one in the south and the other in the north, which was one of the two traditional Tamil habitats. The other Tamil habitat was in southern Indian subcontinent. During their time, with the introduction of chili, the world's first curry powder, Tamil Portuguese curry powder emerged first. This originated from their very first islet colony, named Kais Islet by the Portuguese, later renamed as Kates by Dutch, similar to the name of a town in the Netherlands. It is important to note that during this time, Tamil words like curry, papadum, mango, congee, and mulligatawny arrived in the English language via Portuguese in the 16th century. Remember that the English East India Company was not formed until 17th century. The Portuguese were replaced by the Dutch in a violent war in the late 17th century. The Dutch now took over the two colonies in the island nation of Ceylon. During their time curry developed further, including a still much like sambal, a precursor to the peri-peri sauce that they took to their other colony South Africa. The Franco-Dutch War in Europe resulted in a peaceful handover of Dutch colonies to the British, and so the two colonies in the island of Ceylon became British colonies in 1796. The British also acquired two more independent kingdoms, Kandy and Varni, by force. In 1833, they combined all to establish British Ceylon. It is important to note that because the colony's handover agreement was signed in London, the island of Ceylon was a crown colony from the outset. During this time, the British East India Company was capturing areas in the Indian subcontinent. Only in 1858 did the British Parliament dissolve the East India Company and take the colony as a crown colony. It seems that because of the 300 years of European rule before them, by the Portuguese and Dutch, and the resultant cultural changes, the British decided to administer British Ceylon separately from British India despite both being separated by an 18 nautical mile sea. At the same time, Andaman and Nicobar Island, which was 1,400 nautical miles away, was annexed with British India. British rule in Ceylon lasted until February 1948. The colonial era of the Europeans began with the Portuguese and continued with the Dutch and then the British, lasting for about 450 years and bringing many changes to many aspects of life. The curry of the Tamils in the northern part of the island nation of Ceylon had been Europeanized already during these 450 years. However, what we have in the UK is not the same but what the British in Madras, Chennai, especially Robert Clive and his soldiers, took to West Bengal in 1754. During the British colonial time in the 19th century, Tamils of both habitats started sharing their culinary experience with the increased travel under one colonial power, the British. This was not shared with the UK, where curry was introduced first by a man from Bengal, Sarkaddin Muhammad, and many Indian curry houses are owned and run by people from Bengal and then Bangladesh. So, to resolve the Great British Curry authenticity crisis, this must be understood, and the curry should be upgraded to the one that had already been Europeanized during those 450 years. The bottom line is that the curry in the UK had not been introduced either by the Tamils or by the British themselves but by secondary sources whom the British introduced during the colonial era, and so we have the curry crisis. One more story to add: there was a small French colony of the Tamils in the Indian subcontinent. Puducherry was a French colony simultaneously run parallel to British India. Situated in the curry zone or Coromandel, in addition to those 450 years, we can conclude that curry was Europeanized not only by the Portuguese, Dutch, and British but also by the French too. But what we have in the UK is not the one Europeanized by these European colonial powers, and that is the issue the curry in the UK is facing. It needs upgrading from its 18th century version to the latest version of Tamil curry. Please like, share, subscribe and comment. Thanks for watching.